Good evening from Boston College. I am Jim Keenan, Canisius Professor, Director at the Jesuit Institute, Co-Director of the Gabelli Presidential Scholars Program, and Vice Provost of Global Engagement at Boston College. I welcome you to the show at 6, Boston College and the Common Good. The show at 6 features friends and members of the BC community discussing a range of issues affecting our world today, all revolving around the theme of the common good. Topics include how the BC community is responding to the effects of COVID-19, to the enduring challenges of the marginalized, to our own resiliency and solidarity, and to the upbuilding of human dignity throughout the world. The show is based on the central insight of the common good, that is, that the resources that humanity has and needs must be shared equitably. For instance, today, each of us is called to promote the common good by social distancing, by wearing masks, and by washing our hands. These practices, like other forms of solidarity, are not only for our own good, but for the common good. Before I introduce you to this evening's host, Vice President, I want to tell you that at 6:40 this evening, Joy and I will begin to ask our guest questions from the audience. Members of the audience can pose questions before 6:40 via the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Again, members of the audience can pose questions before 6:40 via the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. They should identify themselves by their name and relationship to Boston College. It's my pleasure now to introduce my friend and colleague, Joy Moore. Joy Moore is the Vice President for Student Affairs here at Boston College, a secondary school and higher education administrator. She has served at a variety of independent schools and universities over a 35-year career. Prior to returning to Boston College in 2011, Moore served 4 years as the interim and deputy head of school at the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy in Johannesburg, South Africa. She also served as the head of school at the Archer School in Los Angeles, California, and as the associate head director of upper school at Dana Hall in Wellesley, Massachusetts. As a university administrator, she has held a variety of leadership positions at the University of California at Berkeley, the University of San Francisco, and Boston College. Her experience extends into the field of alumni engagement and fundraising. An active local and national volunteer, she has served as a trustee and board member for the National Coalition of Girls' Schools, the Nashoba Brooks School, Dana Hall School, the South African Heads of Independent Schools Association, and the South African Girls' School Association. As a community volunteer, Moore served for many years as co-president of the Wellesley chapter of the National A Better Chance organization. Moore also served on the boards of the Women's Lunch Place in Boston and the Newton Wellesley Hospital Foundation Board. A 1981 graduate of the Lynch School of Education and recipient of an honorary doctorate degree in 2010 from Boston College, she is a proud double eagle. Moore also received the University of San Francisco Merit Award and the Associated Student Appreciation Award for her dedication and support of students. Welcome, Joy. The show is all yours.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Jim. Much appreciated. And I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to host the Voices of 2020 on the show at 6. And I am thrilled to be joined by members of the class of 2020. Before I ask our guests to introduce themselves, let me begin by congratulating each of them and their 2020 classmates on their graduation from Boston College just this past Monday. On behalf of the faculty and staff, we applaud your many achievements and all that you added to the vibrant intellectual, social, and spiritual life of the campus. And we know you will continue to stay connected as a proud BC alumna. So now let's begin by asking each of you to introduce yourself. Maybe you can just tell us your full name, your school and your major, hometown, and activities that you were involved with as a student. And why don't we start with Joseph?
Hi, my name is Joseph Nano. I majored in biology and neuroscience on the pre-med track. I grew up in Falmouth, Maine. At Boston College, I used to participate in the Endowed College program, and I volunteered for Boston College EMS. Also, I was fortunate to work for the Office of Vice President Student Affairs. Off campus, I volunteered at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And by the end of my senior year, the COVID-19 pandemic inspired me to reach out to some of my science professors to help me conduct a research study that will provide a better understanding about the impact of COVID-19 on students' academic performance, social life, and mental state. This study will provide a survey, which will be open to undergraduate students in the US. We're currently receiving the survey responses from students, including BC students, and we're so excited to share the results by the end of the year.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, Joseph. And how about Ignacio?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Ignacio. I just graduated, like all of you, from BC this past Monday. I am from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I majored in political science and minor in management and leadership. Kind of like my involvements in Boston College has been in the undergraduate government of Boston College, in the Latin American Business Club, and the first year experience as an orientation leader. I was also my freshman year in the Residential Hall Association, part of the board of Hardy-Cushing. And I also want to highlight my involvement in the Corcoran Center for Real Estate and Urban Action internship that is offered for students on the summer. So yeah, and all of these experiences have helped me develop as a person and as a professional now that I'm entering into the workforce.
Terrific. Thanks, Ignacio. And how about Caitlin?
Hi, everybody. My name is Caitlin Ferrari. I just graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in neuroscience from the Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences. I'm from Two Harbors, Minnesota, originally. When I was at BC, I participated in the Arupe Immersion Program, where I was lucky enough to go to Nicaragua my sophomore year and the US-Mexico border my senior year. I also was a campus school volunteer for 3 years, and I did off-campus research at Harvard Medical School during my junior and senior year, and I was also a choir member in the Liturgy Arts group.
Terrific. Thanks, Caitlin. And let's see, Michael.
Hi, Michael Sagai. Just like everyone else, I graduated on last Monday. I majored in political science and African diaspora studies. At BC, I was involved in undergraduate government at Boston College, the men's club soccer team, Office of First Year Experience as an orientation leader, Office of Student Formation as a Compass mentor, and I was a resident assistant as well. And I'm happy to be here tonight.
Great. Thanks, Michael, for that introduction. And Victoria.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Ng. I also graduated on Monday. My majors were English and economics. I'm from Weymouth, Massachusetts. And at BC, I was involved with undergraduate government, specifically within the AHANA Plus Leadership Council. I was also a student representative on the Diversity Steering Committee, and I did the Jamaica Magis Service Immersion trip. I was in the Pulse program my freshman year. I was an Eagle intern fellow, and I was also a Corcoran Center for Real Estate and Urban Action intern as well.
Thanks so much, Victoria. So as the audience can hear, we have some underachievers here, not doing enough. It really is an example of our student body at Boston College. But I thought it might be interesting and helpful for the audience who may not have visited Boston College in a while, if you might share a little bit about our student community. So what are today's students like? What are they passionate about? And what does being a BC student mean to you? And maybe you could throw in what you think it means to them as well. So maybe we'll start with Caitlin on this one.
So the BC students that I found in my corner were really passionate about social justice, which is a term that I truly never even heard before I came to the Heights, particularly through the Arupe Immersion program that I talked about earlier, where I went to the US-Mexico border in Nicaragua. I found that we just had such an intense passion for identifying similarities with people whose stories were entirely different than our own, and we got to meet local residents and have really intentional conversations. And amongst the students that I went on these trips with, we just had such a drive to reach common humanity with the local residents we met, and I thought that that was something really special about Boston College students.
Thanks, Caitlin. Who else might want to answer that question? Want to raise your hand? I can see you. Or I'll call on you. All right, Ignacio.
So one thing that I wanted to add to what Caitlin mentioned is the BC student, the BC community is focused on service and advocacy. Following up on Caitlin, working in UGBC, I've had the opportunity to meet students that have dedicated their advocate efforts to pay more attention to those efforts, more than they pay attention, especially for their academics. They want to ensure that the student life is a good life on campus and off campus. One example, for example, it could be when I was working in UGBC with the LGBTQ plus Leadership Council, Simone and Chris, they worked intense and very hard to provide an activity every single week for the community. They worked harder than anyone else in the organization to ensure that all of the community members felt at home at BC, which shows how they also balance their academics while giving like this responsibility, such as if it was like a full-time job. So that just is something to admire, especially from the BC community. And now, well, they're very successful after college because of what they have done on the BC community and also what they are doing in the world right now.
Well said, Ignacio. Thank you. Anyone else want to go with that question? If not, I'll move on to the next one that we have. So this one has to do with COVID-19. So given that it has rocked our world, could you give us maybe a sense of what a typical day for you as a student was sort of pre-COVID-19? So what does the day in the life of a BC student, particularly a senior, look like? Michael.
I would definitely say it varies, but a normal day would just wake up. I'd wake up, go to class. After class, hang out on the quad if it was a warm day. If it wasn't, I'd probably be found in McRoy, Mac Dining Hall, or in Carnegie Hall doing work for UGBC or other like student involvements that I was participating in. And then after around like 6 to 7 p.m., I'd head home back to Ignacio Hall, otherwise known as Iggy, and just hang out, do some homework, and hang out with friends. And that was a normal day, like pre-COVID. Honestly, COVID like messed everything up, but that was a normal day in my life.
Thanks, Michael. Joseph, how about for you? Pre-COVID days.
Yes. So one of the things that I've learned from my experience at BC is to balance my health and schoolwork. So being on the pre-med track required kind of countless hours of studying. So for my typical day during the week, so I usually wake up at 4 a.m. I like to start my morning with some workout, and then I spend 3 to 4 hours doing my homework, preparing for my classes. Sometimes around 8 a.m. I like to have a breakfast, and I usually start my classes at 9 a.m. My last class usually ends around 3 p.m. and then I usually go to my professor's office hours, which happens sometimes between 3 to 5 p.m. After that, I usually have dinner with my friends or roommates. At 7 p.m., I usually start studying for my classes and I go to bed by 9 p.m. Over the weekend, that's when I like to do some more social activities, such as like walking around campus with friends. I usually volunteer as an EMT on Saturdays for hockey, football, or baseball games. On Sundays, I spend most of my day with my friends in the library. Um, so that's kind of my typical day pre-COVID-19.
Yeah. Very full day. Did I hear you say 4 a.m. you wake up?
That's right.
My goodness, Joseph. Okay, Victoria, how about you take the last one on this question?
So similarly to Michael, I would also spend a lot of time in Kearney Hall because that's home to BC's Office of Student Involvement, where I would often like do my homework but talk to our advisor and our graduate assistants. And I would do my homework also in Stokes Hall because it's home to the English department and the chocolate bar, which I miss a lot. And I also worked off campus, or like, I guess you could say on campus, but physically off, on Brighton campus. And I was an accounting assistant for auxiliary services. So between like working class, between class, I would go to work, or days where I didn't have class, I would go to work, and I would spend a large portion of my time at work. And then after work, my supervisor, Jasnelle Porcena, was also kind enough to eat dinner with us because we often worked until like 5 or 6. And then I would come home and hang out with my friends in the mods or go to the new Plex while I thought it could last.
That's great. Thanks, Victoria. So now, will you walk us through that fateful day when you first learned that students had to depart campus for the remainder of the school year due to the coronavirus? I think people have that exact day and time emblazoned in their minds. And so I wondered if you might share those experiences that you had at that time. Maybe we can start with Ignacio.
Yes, so it was a very interesting day because I felt like coming back from spring break, there were a lot of rumors that, BC might put classes online. So in a way, it was somewhat expected, but in a way, it was shocking that like everybody had to kind of like depart from campus like in a week. So I remember I had a class from 4:30 to 6:30, social innovation entrepreneurship. And I remember like the professor had sent us an email before saying like it's optional that you can, if you want to come to class, and if not, then you can just like take the class online. And so what I did is I ended up going to the class, and it was like only like half of the students there. And I remember that like at 5, we kind of received the email from President Farah Leahy. And then one of the students mentioned it to the professor, and the professor handled it really well. I felt that in a way, amid all that time of confusion and just scared experience of what was going to happen in the future, the professor said like we should take our time. He canceled the class. He said go to your dorm, talk to your friends, talk to your family members. So that was an opportunity for me to like kind of like leave class and then go to my dorm, call my loved ones, call my family, and just like talk to them and kind of like debrief of what was going on. And what was going to be like my next steps going forward. Was staying on campus or staying off campus a good decision for me, or was going back home and waiting until everything kind of like settled down? So it was a very interesting yet confusing experience. It sort of felt like a movie in a way. Sometimes we've never gone through anything like this before. And this was something that it was very different from anything else that we've lived.
Thank you, Ignacio. Caitlin, what do you remember about that day?
Yeah, I think I was equally shocked and shook by the whole thing. I was on my way home from work at Harvard Med, and I was on the T, and I was talking to my mom, and I remember being like, oh my gosh, like I got the email, and I need to figure out what to do now. Because I'm from Minnesota, so like all of a sudden I have to store my stuff somewhere, I have to like book a plane ticket, all these different moving parts of the puzzle. And I remember just wanting to get home and like be with my roommates so badly because they were the ones that I knew like would be there right away. And we all came together that night, and then the mods just like erupted into like a tailgate scene, except so sad, like crying everywhere. Just like everybody wanted to be together, and we knew that our time was kind of running out in the weirdest way, and it was really a sad and awful moment. But at the same time, I was really proud that we all came together, and like we did the senior sunrise the day before we left, and it was just like all of these things that we packed into the last couple of days that I was really thankful that we got to do.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Caitlin. Michael, you want to chime in?
Definitely. To echo Ignacio and Caitlin, it was definitely a really surreal, yet like expected a little bit, just because like we were all coming back from spring break, and like we were hearing like a lot of like the voices and conversations about coronavirus like getting louder and louder. I was in Hillside when I got the email, and everyone kind of like went silent and like erupted, and a lot of people were crying. A lot of people were just like bouncing off the joy. Like school is done, probably like underclassmen who know they have more years left. But I like was really like heartbroken. I went back to like my room, Ignacio B56, and just kind of sat with my roommates and thought like about like what were we gonna do next? Like we had a great time in spring break, thought we were gonna have a great rest of the semester. And although like we definitely like understood the decision, like of course like everyone's safety is paramount, we were also kind of like wrestling with the feeling that this was the end and it was coming sooner rather than later. And so just try to use that day to like just decompress, reflect, but also like take the most of the time that we had left as a little quartet and the wider BC community, and just try to remember some of the moments that really made us connected and feel proud to be an Eagle, but also realize that this is our time to depart.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. So since that departure time there in mid-March, what have your friends and classmates sort of been talking about most? I know, you know, there's definitely the sense of what was it like to sort of manage and have to adjust to online and remote instruction. So I'm wondering what kinds of things you and your friends talked about. Joseph.
I think we've been talking about our families and how the pandemic affected our lives. At least based on my experience and like my friends' experience, I think our professors did a great job transitioning to remote learning, and they were very understandable. BC offered the pass-fail option for classes, and I was so thankful for it. I ended up declaring one of my classes as pass-fail, and I have a lot of friends who did the same thing. So that was a big deal for us.
Great, thanks, Joseph. Ignacio.
Yes, so one of the things that we've been talking, especially since mid-March, was kind of like echoing what Joseph mentioned in a way of like, how has COVID-19 affected our families, affected kind of like the situation that we're in. But in a way, it was very comforting, especially to talk to my friends and talk to my family members about what was going on, and to also see that everyone kind of like was in the same boat. Everyone was also facing the same difficulties of kind of like adjusting, especially to this new life that we would have for the following months. And one of the things that we try to emphasize was kind of like be that support group for each other, whether it is through kind of like try to talk as much as we can throughout the week, try to check up on everyone, while at the same time try to make sure that we also be vocal about what we're going through, because we're not alone in this. And I feel like that was something that has been occurring since mid-March, kind of like seeing that it's a difficult situation, but it should not be faced alone. It should be faced together. And we can find that strength together by vocalizing our experiences and making sure that we're there for one another.
That's great. Thanks, Ignacio. So, you know, at BC, we talk about the common good quite a bit. So when you reflect on the meaning of the common good, what comes to mind for you? Maybe Caitlin, you can start.
Yeah, so when I think about the common good, I think about removing our young adult, educated, very fortunate in many ways selves from the immediate situation at hand, and really thinking about the people and places that surround us and how realities shift and change for different age groups, different socioeconomic statuses, and different lived experiences. So one of the things that I learned while at BC that I carry with me every day is this idea that I am no more blessed by God than any other person who has a different lived experience than I do. What I can say is that I'm lucky to have gone to a world-class institution, to work at one of the most prestigious medical schools in the world, and to have traveled and to have met so many beautiful people in these last 4 years. But none of those privileges make me any more blessed than a person that is homeless that I might encounter outside of the Boston Public Library, because they too are made in the image and likeness of God. And I think that now that we've been awarded these 4-year degrees of intense and enlightening education, I think it's our responsibility to use our esteem in society to work towards the common good. And to me, the common good is just meeting people where they are, not trying to bring them up where we may be, but to go with open arms and to lean into their reality, to learn from it, and to show that we want to join in their humanity, even when a lived experience of another might be entirely different than our own.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. Well put. Victoria, how about for you, the common good?
When I think of the common good, more simply, I just think about equality, or a specific standard of quality of life that everyone could have access to, but some do not. And I think pursuing the common good comes with the responsibility to definitely diminish those barriers that some people face to access that quality of life.
Thanks so much, Victoria. Continuing on with the common good, maybe you can share with us where you have witnessed the common good playing out at BC, and do you see the common good being practiced by members of the BC community? And if so, maybe you can describe what you have witnessed in regards to the common good. Joseph, would you like to start?
Sure. So I would say yes. I thought it was amazing how Boston College community values sustainability. So for example, last fall, I had a lot of friends who stopped using the straws, for example, and provided in the dining halls and purchased reusable straws. Same thing for the plastic bags. I remember dining halls used to encourage us to do the same thing. I think this shows how our community is not being selfish by thinking about today, but they're thinking about the future generation. It goes back to the idea of how small acts can have big effects and make a difference in our community by reducing, let's say, the global warming or fighting climate change.
Great. How about you, Michael?
I think equity and marginalization when it comes to the common good. And so I think there's a lot of spaces on Boston College's campus and a lot of groups that participate in that work. I think a lot of like mentorship programs at Boston College do a lot of that work, whether it be Freshman League, Rise, Strong Women, Strong Girls, that provide like more angles and opportunities for folks to come in from the margins in our community, whether it be like to an identity you own and come into Boston College and feel equitable and feel included and feel like they can make their mark, but also like in the greater like Boston area, whether it be through the Pulse program, the campus school, programs and organizations that do a lot of work in breaking down those barriers, as Victoria mentioned, and opening the pie to everyone and making a lot of things accessible. And so campus school does a lot of that. And a lot of the programs that I just mentioned do a lot of that work of working towards the common good, but also putting justice at the center of their work.
Great. Thanks, Michael. So you have all spent your 4 years at the Heights, and no doubt there have been good times, but also challenging times, I imagine. And so what did you call upon in times of challenge and stress and uncertainty? Maybe what or maybe who did you call upon during these challenging times at BC? Maybe Caitlin?
I definitely called upon my mom. She's a 5th grade teacher, and sometimes I would get so caught up in the rigor of the pre-med, the neuroscience curriculum, and I would just freak out. And I would call her and she would just remind me how lucky I was to be learning, just learning, and to really forget about the stress, because I was in such a privileged position to just like have these beautiful and exciting classes, even though that they were super difficult. So she would be someone that I could call at any time of the day, and she would just know how to calm me down and know how to make me appreciate where I was and what I was doing.
Shout out to moms everywhere. And how about for you, Joseph?
I would say my parents. I remember by the end of my senior year in high school, I told my parents, and I was joking, that I will call them only once every 2 weeks. Back then, I was so excited to go to college and stay away from the home environment, but that didn't happen. And for the past 4 years, I believe I used to text or even phone call my parents at least once a day and like every day. And I've learned that parents are one of the best resources that we have in life. And I would say if I'm on campus and after parents, I would reach out to my roommates and best friends.
Great. Thanks for that. So let's maybe now transition a little bit to coming to the end of your Boston College career. So semester's over and you've all graduated. Sadly, we were not able to have our traditional commencement due to the pandemic. How did that day play out for you? And also, I'd be interested to know, what did you think of the video that you received and some of the online tributes that came through? Just share a little bit of that. Victoria, would you like to start?
I would say, I mean, on that specific Monday, I was feeling pretty gloomy, but I decided to do a lot of other things, so I didn't have to feel that gloom. But I also feel like I celebrated before Monday. After my last final, I went to get some takeout ice cream, and before Monday, the weather was really good, so I had luckily, unfortunately, I live in Massachusetts, so I had driven to BC to take a picture of myself in front of Gas and Alone with help of my mom. And I mean, I just feel like as a senior, there's like more celebration that comes like before the specific day that you can, in my opinion, or at least that I was grateful for. And I always really liked the BC videos. I really like the video that Communications came out with us, or for us, and I really like the tribute that they had to our specific class video that we got when we were accepted students. And I watched the video in the same place in my house that I had watched that video in 2016.
Oh, that's very symbolic. Very nice. Very nice to hear that. Let's see. How about Ignacio?
Yes, so following up on what Victoria mentioned, kind of like similar experiences. I remember that 2016 video when I got accepted to Boston College, and I remember that it was the BC 2020, and it was a really great video just because it kind of like gave me a lot of motivation and happiness that I was going to such a great school. And then watching it in 2020 kind of like provided, in a way, a little bit of closure to what had been a very confused month or a month and a half that happened just after the news broke out that we had to return home. And that's kind of like, I was talking to one of my friends yesterday, and it was very similar, the experiences that we were having in terms of that we didn't feel that it was a closure. We didn't feel that we were like graduating. We didn't feel that we were BC alum. But the online videos and the resources that BC has been providing, and the opportunity to potentially have like some closing ceremonies in October, have kind of provided us that sense of closure of this chapter at Boston College in order to continue into the new chapter that is either going to grad school or going to work.
Yeah. Great. And how about for you, Joseph?
Although we didn't have a traditional commencement, I always like to remind myself that there's a pandemic and that in some way BC is protecting us and our families. I really enjoyed watching the videos that were made for us, and I'm thankful that we're still going to be able to celebrate in October, so which is a good thing.
Absolutely, it is, and we are all driving towards that for sure. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what's next for you. So while there's still a lot of uncertainty out there about the virus and the second wave and the third wave and how many waves, who knows, we're going to have, but I imagine that all of you have some plans ready for the summer or the fall, and wondered if you might want to share a little bit about what you'll be doing as you transition from being a student into the workforce, or if you're going to graduate school, or if you're going to be doing volunteer service. Maybe Michael, we can start with you.
Well, I have no solidified plans as of right now, but I'm hopefully looking forward to joining a racial justice organization either in Washington, D.C. or New York City in the near future. So working on that.
All right, we can put a little advertisement out here on the show at 6 for those listening. They're hiring, looking for that. How about you, Caitlin?
I'm heading back to Boston on Wednesday to start working full-time in the same lab at Harvard Med that I've trained in for the past 2 years. So I'll be a research tech over there, and I'm applying to medical school this summer and taking the MCAT. So those are my plans.
Very busy indeed. And how about you, Victoria?
I'm applying to full-time jobs, and this has made me pretty industry flexible, if you will. But I'm also using this time to think about what I would want out of a law school experience. In September, I took the LSAT, and I'd like to give myself a few years before I go back to school, and I'm kind of dedicated to working, especially before I go back to school.
Sounds good. And Ignacio?
Yes, so this next August, I will be working in Oracle in the greater Boston area as one of the business development consultants there. It's a very exciting opportunity, and kind of like the pandemic has not changed my interest at all. In fact, it has kind of like made me prepare even more for the role and not take anything for granted. With all the uncertainty that's been going on, Oracle has made sure that we would start in August. And so like the opportunity to have this summer to kind of like prepare and study for the role is something that I'm looking forward to.
Sounds exciting. And Joseph, what are your plans?
I'm currently taking some summer courses at BC, but I have 3 goals for this year. First, I'm currently writing a book, and I'm hoping to publish it this fall. Second, I'm hoping to finish the research study that I'm doing regarding COVID-19 and publish the results by the end of the year. And I guess third, I'm planning to take the MCAT so I can apply to medical schools.
You're just a little busy, I would say, writing your book about the pandemic. We want an advanced copy at Boston College, so we know all the insights that you discovered. All right. Let me ask this question just as we sort of start to wrap up, and I know we're going to be moving to the audience question soon, but when you look back over your 4 years, what 3 things will you remember most? Maybe start with you, Victoria.
I would say Marathon Monday is the thing that I'll miss the most. Doing my homework in the chocolate bar follows that. And my favorite classes, which were Asian American Literature, Asian American Media, Middle English Alliterative Poetry, and Public Policy in an Aging Society.
Oh, thanks. And how about you, Michael? What are you going to miss most?
Oh, that's hard. I would say my advisors, my first year advisor, Professor Adair, Professor Frederick, Professor McGuffey, my friends for sure, and I think just the student involvement culture at BC of just getting engaged in a passion and interest in a hobby and just sticking to it no matter what.
Great. And how about you, Ignacio? 3 things that you'll remember most?
Yes, so the 3 things I'll remember the most would have to be the people, especially the mentors, my friends, the people that I work with, the professors that I took class with. I learned a lot from them, and that brings to my second point, which is the lessons. I feel like the 4 years at BC were 4 years that I developed a lot as a person, and now as a professional entering into the workforce, that have helped me in a way, using the Jesuit values to be a man for others, and to not only have an impact as a professional, but also have an impact outside of the workforce, and having that opportunity to experience that in Boston College, both in person and seeing the people around me, has something that I'm not going to forget, especially of the experience and the development that I gathered from the institution. And the third thing would have to be, especially has been this last couple of months, and especially as we've talked a lot in this panel, and has been like kind of like when the news broke out that we all had to leave. And it's not a bad memory. In fact, it's a good memory, because it's kind of like a shared experience that I will have with everyone from the class of 2020, that whenever I see them, let's say in the future, there's something that we haven't shared, there's something that we have in common. There's something that we can talk about, and in a way we can find comfort and support in each other. So that's something that I definitely, those are the three things I'll remember from my BC experience.
That's great. Thanks, Ignacio. And how about Joseph? 3 things that you'll remember.
I would say the first thing is chatting with my professors during office hours. The second thing is the annual tradition of lighting the Christmas tree. And the third thing is probably pulling all-nighter with my friends in Babson or O'Neill Library during finals.
Joseph, how do you pull all-nighters when you wake up at 4 in the morning? How does that work?
I do some exceptions during finals.
Okay, that's good. All right, and Caitlin, 3 things you'll remember most.
I'm definitely going to miss the mods. Football tailgates were so fun. Also, singing at Christmas Mass with the Liturgy Arts Group every year was just a beautiful memory. And my friends, just like the spaces for intentional conversation that we had, I think that was something that I really loved about my BC experience.
Great. Thanks so much. So it looks like now it's time to turn to questions from the audience. And
Do you want to go first, Joyce?
Well, why don't you go ahead first?
Okay, so this is for Joseph. And it's a question from Sebastian Cota, an incoming first year student, who wants to know if you could tell us about your time management with your academics and activities at Boston College and volunteering at Brigham Hospital. Is it difficult to balance these activities? Actually, it's good for you, Joseph, but it's good for anybody else who wants to answer that question. Joseph.
Okay. Well, first I want to congratulate you for getting accepted into Boston College. To answer your question, I would say a couple of things. I've learned from Boston College that my schedule as a student can be totally different than my roommate's schedule, which is totally fine. Personally, I always like to prioritize my time based on what I have going on during a specific week. So for example, if I have an exam in 2 weeks, or let's say next week, I either start preparing for that exam ahead of time, or I try to just prioritize my time for that week for that specific, let's say, exam or quiz. So that's usually how I prioritize my time and try to balance between the two.
Anybody else want to chime in about balancing? Ignacio.
Yes, so following up on what Joseph mentioned, I think a key word that he mentioned was prioritize. When you go into Boston College, you kind of have to like see everything in the full picture, in terms of like, you're not just in Boston College because of your academics, you're in there to grow as a person. So joining extracurriculars, meeting new people, trying to balance both your academic schedule with your extracurriculars is going to be crucial, you know? So let's say, for example, you join quite a few extracurriculars, then maybe you could like try to see if your classes can be more like in the morning or more like in the middle of the day. So that way you can have enough time for like meetings and going to activities. Now, when you like, let's say, step into your junior year, senior year, that you're looking for internships or for job opportunities, then you might kind of like would need to switch the schedule and balance it out, sort of like moving your classes more to the afternoon, so that way you can have an opportunity to go to the events that are being hosted on campus for any potential internship or job opportunities. But it all takes, a matter of just balancing your time, having a schedule, and making sure that no like extracurricular with classes kind of like intersect, so that way you can have time to do both successfully.
Anybody else? Okay, Victoria.
I would say also something to remember is keeping your time and your schedule in line definitely has to do with what you're passionate about. And when you're a freshman or just entering Boston College, there are so many things for you to try and so many things for you to get involved in, which you can definitely explore. And maybe it sounds like super hopeful, but I really think like your schedule can align with what you find you most value after exploring all those things and trying so many things that BC has to offer.
Joy, you want to take number 2?
I'm going to jump around a little bit, wanting to get to this question from Jenny Purnell and Margaret Thomas, faculty members at BC, and their questions. What do the students think? What do you all think that your most meaningful academic experience was? A class, a thesis, or a research project, maybe a book, and also maybe a favorite memory or interaction with a faculty member that opened you to the notion of the common good. Who might want to take that? Michael.
So for me, I came in my freshman year very undeclared and undecided what I wanted to do. And I signed up for one of the Enduring Question courses that was taught by Professor Frederick in English and Professor McGuffey in sociology, called Narrating Black Intimacies and Black Intimacy and Intersectionality. And this course taught me through a lot of different books, media, interviews, speeches, personal projects, that our world is socially constructed. And it taught me that my Blackness was something that I could figure out for myself and wasn't always defined by the world, and that I could create space for myself to understand my Blackness and my understanding of self, but also in how do I my intimacy with others. And so this course took me into African diaspora studies and made me dive into not only the curriculum, but the faculty as well, and pushed me to look at opportunities that I saw on campus and off campus to change our world, to transform it so that racial justice is more at the center and core, and that we're looking to uplift and elevate marginalized folks and create systems that are more equitable for all.
Thank you, Matthew. Caitlin.
One really fun memory I have is that one of my theology professors had group student dinners. So she would actually take 5 or 6 of us out to this local Thai restaurant. And it was just so fun to get to know her because it was her and her husband that paid for dinner for all of us kids. And it was just easy, fun conversation. And some point, I guess she found out that I loved mangoes, and she's from the Philippines. So she actually went to the Philippines and came back with a bunch of treats, and she brought me a bag of dried mangoes. And it was such a fun and intentional little gift that just brightened my day. So that was a fun memory.
That's lovely. Others? Faculty experiences, interactions? Ignacia.
So one thing that I want to echo both Michael and Caitlin is the professors you meet and the faculty members. It's different from high school in a way. The professors at Boston College drive their academic instruction to be more of a discussion based, so that way students can voice their thoughts, can voice their opinions in certain matters, so it can be more of a discussion and a conversation between the professor and the classmates, so both sides can learn from each other. And also at the same time, you have the opportunity, and that's one of the most interesting things that I found at BC, is you have the opportunity to establish really good relationships with your professors. They get to know every single person in the class, or they try their best to know every single person in the class, as Caitlin mentioned, of how the professors do certain things for their students, especially for them to feel welcome, for them to feel in a way included in this class, included in this part, in this BC community.
That's great, Ignacio. Thank you for that. So here's a question from a classmate, Jolie Centraccio. And she says, hi, everyone. It's wonderful hearing from each of you. My question is, what would you say has been a positive for you amidst this pandemic? So what has come out on top as a positive during this period of time? Caitlin?
I think the family time is something that's been really nice. My dad is a pilot, so he's been gone off and on just like my whole upbringing. So he's actually been able to be home for the past 2 months, and being together as a family, this is the most time in my entire life. So that's been really cool. And I also like helped him insulate the garage and helped my mom put down grass seed, like just very normal things that I couldn't do if I was in Boston. So those, yeah, I've appreciated that opportunity to do that.
Okay. Others? How about you, Joseph? What's come out of this pandemic that's positive for you?
I would say two things. The first thing is the fact that all of my family members are healthy and safe. The second thing is probably the fact that I ended up finishing the school year in a good way, and because I was worried after the pandemic started. So I would say these are the kind of two things that have been very positive for the past almost a month.
That's great, thank you. Anyone else? So how about this question as we're getting close to wrapping up? What advice would you have for rising seniors? So now that you have graduated and have made it through, and particularly because you had an unprecedented ending to your career at Boston College, but what advice might you give to seniors who are on their way? I want to think about that for a minute. Okay, we'll start with you, Michael.
I would say there's no like right time to do like what you want to do. And so what I mean by that is that don't like think that like you have to wait for the right circumstances, the right space, the right people to do what you want to do with your life. And I think I'm definitely one of those like overly cautious, like I'm gonna wait like kind of people. But this pandemic has truly showed me that like time is like of the essence in every single regard, especially as folks are like dying all over the globe at like an unprecedented rate, that like time is not for granted. And so if you have a project that you want to do, if you have a hobby that you want to do, just start now. And I think for you like rising seniors, that would mean starting in the fall, like start immediately what you want to do. If that takes like changing your like approach and changing your ethos or changing your direction and going away from one club to another, I'd say just do that and don't doubt your decision. Just roll with the punches and trust with what comes next.
Very good advice, Michael. How about you, Victoria? What advice do you have for the rising seniors?
I would say primarily go with the flow. And in addition, senior year is like the most hard-hitting time when people start to think about their lives after BC. And in that, you should definitely be proud of all that you have to offer the world after BC, and think about how many untraditional paths there are to get to where you would like to go that other people have taken, as opposed to like that alongside your roommate or your friend that you have seen over and over again for 4 years. There's like, the world is your oyster, honestly.
Right. Thanks, Victoria. Joseph, what advice do you have for the rising seniors?
I agree with Michael and Victoria. I basically would say challenge yourself to do something new and make the best of it in your own way.
And you, Ignacio, advice?
just following up on what the older panelists have been mentioning, is basically doing things and taking advantage of your last senior year. We can actually like say like, look, like Michael mentioned, time is essence, and the more time you take advantage of, the more you're gonna feel fulfilled. So whether it's, for example, thinking about post-grad early on, try to think about that, try to prioritize those things, so that way once you have that settled, you can like spend time with friends, or at the same time join a new extracurricular, try new things that you haven't done before. BC offers a community that is from people all around the world. Meet new people, create new friends. So that's one thing that you have to take advantage, because there's no other place like BC.
Well said. No other place like BC. Exactly. And Caitlin, advice for rising seniors.
I would say try not to stress out about the work so much, because it's gotten done every single time up until now, and it will continue to get done until you're finished. So make that extra time for your friends. Make that extra time to go to that movie, to go wherever you want to go. Like, just have fun, because it's really valuable.
And how about any sort of final words that any of you might like to share as we get close to wrapping up? Maybe any advice to incoming first-year students? Ignacio?
Yes, so for the incoming first-year students, one thing of advice that I want to give you all is to be comfortable with being uncomfortable in a way. You're going into BC, try to do things very differently from what you did in high school, in ways of like, instead of joining the same clubs, try to join new things that you would like to join. Try to explore the interests that you have, and also try to explore any interests that you may not have, but that you might develop in your BC experience. I definitely think Boston College is 4 years where you can develop to your potential immensely, but all of that takes time of stepping outside of your own bubble, meeting new people, interacting with the different communities at BC, interacting with professors, interacting with faculty members. Don't just set up with your group of friends. Explore and expand your group of friends as much as you can. I'd say, as I mentioned before, it's BC, there's no place like BC. You have an opportunity to be there for 4 years, and trust me, the 4 years go really fast. So definitely from day one, start this new chapter in your life and take the most out of it.
Excellent advice, Ignacio. Anyone else like to offer some advice? Michael?
Believe in yourself. Coming in, like, you are coming from being a senior in high school to being a first-year student at a four-year university, and you're often told to figure out the lay of the land, figure out your space, figure out your classes, your extracurriculars, the people around you. But in addition to that, don't only just evaluate the world, evaluate your surroundings, but transform them. Believe in your capacity to create change, because you bring something that the other classes don't have, and that's fresh energy, fresh voices, fresh perspectives, especially coming off of this pandemic, that you can come in, revitalize BC, and change the world. So never doubt your abilities, never doubt who you are, believe in yourself, and believe in your ability.
Well said, Michael. Thanks. All right, and Caitlin, we'll wrap it up with you.
Super similar to what Michael said. Just be really kind to yourself. And there are going to be some days when things get really hard, but just remember who you already are to have gotten this far.
That's beautiful. That goes for all of us. Remember who we are. Jim, shall I pass it back to you?
Yes, that'd be great. So I just want to say, as a faculty member, and you should all know that there are quite a number of faculty who are listening to this program, watching you, that Caitlin, Victoria, Michael, Ignacio, Joseph, hearing you has been really superb. It's been really, I think everybody would, we haven't been able to celebrate with you. We haven't been able to do a lot of things. Most of us did not make our way over to the mods to party with you on your last days before you packed up and left. But, I'm a faculty member here since 2002, and I can't tell you when I've been more proud. So I want to thank the 5 of you for just being sensational, for your 4 years, but for this evening, for really saying something that's heartfelt, that's reflective, but really considerate of others. And, you know, like behind all these questions, I think it's one question: what are we learning during this event? And I think that's what you answered all during these questions that Joy had. These many, many questions, which really effectively were, what are you learning? Not just in the 4 years, but in particular these days. For these are times for us to learn, to plan ahead. So I want to thank you. I want to thank in particular my friend Joy. I think the world of her. She manages to get me to volunteer for all sorts of things. So thanks to the all 6 of you. And let me just preview the next segment of our show, because next week we have a group of alumni coming. We have nurses and EMTs coming on Tuesday, and we have docs coming on Friday. But let me say something about on Tuesday. On Tuesday, we have nurses and EMTs treating COVID-19 patients. We have Aristotle Bosley from the class of 18. We have Jana Kanchemi, who's just in your class, Addie Egan, and Catherine McQuaid. And they're going to be hosted by Brian Garreau, the Associate Dean for the Core, and Joyce Edmonds, the Associate Professor of Cornell School of Nursing. That's on May 26th, on next Tuesday, from 6 until 7 p.m. Finally, let me tell you, you need to register for each segment you want to attend. As you know, registration is very brief, but each segment has a different webinar link. So check our webpage at bc.edu/show@6. bc.edu show it at 6. And I want to say to all of you, have a good evening. Thank you.